Whether we wanted it or not, 2026 sees the return of Bungie's Marathon, a series that last showed itself in 1996, 30 years ago. And whilst it might be a controversial release, especially with it being the genre of multiplayer extraction shooter, which I'm personally not a huge fan of, but from what the trailers have shown so far, as well as the voice actors that seem to be linked to the game, Marathon does look like it'll be diving into some of the lore that was set up all of those years ago, taking us back to the original planet from Marathon 1, Tau Ceti 4, as well as the ship we first fought the alien race of the 4 on. That of course being the UESC Marathon that the game is of course named after. Whilst we know little bits about what this game will be focusing on narrative wise, I felt like it was a good opportunity to look back at those original games, mainly 1 and 2 because 3 is just a nightmare of a narrative, and talk about the vital bits of lore that might be essential to know going into the new 2026 Marathon. For all I know, none of what I cover in this video might be relevant. The story might be completely different from what was told back in the 90s, but I feel that would be abusive to the Marathon IP if they weren't going to touch on absolutely any of it. So grab your runner shell, get your I hate new Marathon comments primed and ready, and let's dive into the lore you might need to know for Marathon 2026. This is the original lore of the Marathon IP. Our story first starts back in the Sol system, more specifically on Mars, where humanity had set up a gigantic colony on the sister planet. Mars was kept working because of the creation of gigantic ships known as Christs, aka cargo and resource in-system transports. These ships were hollow, potato-shaped interplanetary spacecrafts that were used to transport all resources and supplies between Earth and Mars. They kept both civilizations going and were ultimately the lifeline of humanity during these spacefaring years. These ships were incredible and a real staple of humanity's technology, but it came at a cost. These ships were almost impossible to maintain because despite having a lifespan of about 100 years, they took 15 years to repair and refit, and took all of humanity's shipbuilding facilities to do so. For a time, 5 Christs existed. However, up until 2310, no more were made, and this resulted in another problem. As soon as one broke down, famine became rampant on Mars. This of course brought about panic to the people of Mars, and as a result one faction started to rise up under the name of Mida. This reached its peak on the 6th of January 2345, where a massive riot took place at a UESC food distribution center, which led to UEG troops absolutely slaughtering the crowds with plasma fire. This would be labelled as the Mizraia massacre, as 500 Martians would be slaughtered in just 5 seconds, and witnessing this, Mida took action and rose up against the UESC, starting a civil war which they would indeed win. That rule did not last long, however, as their short-sightedness meant they had no plans for what to do with Mars, and instead their legacy was removing 10% of the population who were still loyal to the UESC by execution squads. UESC ultimately regrouped and took out all of the Mida forces and drove them into hiding, but now being just a terrorist organisation hiding underground, Mida drew their attention to another project the UESC had, one that was to somehow allow humanity to thrive again in their eyes. Instead of listening to the people and utilising the moon of Deimos to turn it into a new Christ to help with the horrific living conditions on Mars, the UESC instead created a new ship that they'd name as the Marathon, and its goal was to venture out to the Tau Ceti system and form a new colony there. This did not go down well at all, and as a result, the Mida faction tried to take over the ship or sabotage it from the inside. By 2406 that plan had been made and Marathon was to be created with the Deimos moon despite massive backlash to it. Mida ultimately failed to take it over fully when they were in power, however, but had new plans to infiltrate it from the inside, as they would smuggle extensive weapons and ammunition into the ship and also work alongside Bernard Strauss, who was a double agent for Mida, who created 10 battle droids into their society to be used one day in their coup. These were also placed alongside the rampant AI of Durandal, who would also be placed within the ship to be used as their doors operating AI. But really, there was to be another reason for his placement that was never really revealed. Despite all of those plans for Mida to take over the Marathon and the Tau Ceti system, the UESC eventually set off on their new goal and took to the stars, heading to their new colony. It wasn't just the UESC though. This whole new venture was backed by major corporations who wanted a new opportunity to expand their businesses and bring about change for humanity. Such corporations like Traxxas, who were one of the major investors, and New Caloric, who specialized in farming and pharmaceutical products. Eventually, after 300 years, the UESC Marathon reached Tau Ceti IV in 2773 and placed itself in low orbit to blend in with the other moons of that planet. However, despite such a long journey for humanity, peace didn't last long, as they would be immediately and surprisingly attacked by a new alien race that would only go by the name of the phfor, who seemed to appear out of nowhere without any warning whatsoever. As a result of this attack, one of the other AIs placed on the ship named Leela sent out a message 9 minutes after the first attack, and also alerted one of the battle droids placed on the Marathon to awaken and fight back this alien presence. This of course being the main player character, known by many names, but I'll be calling him the Marine. Desperate for answers, Leela gets the Marine to fight back against all of these new aliens and try and re-establish the other two AIs of the ship, the door controls and basic functions of the ship AI of Durandal, and the AI in charge of science, known as Tycho. Eventually, the Marine would locate Durandal and turn him back on, but it was quite evident that the AI had gone completely rampant and had new goals for himself. Rampancy in AI was no joke, as they would go through 3 specific phases. The first would be melancholia, then it would go into the extremely dangerous emotion of anger, and then finally would end in jealousy. Durandal was becoming more and more arrogant during his rampancy and believed that his destiny was to escape the collapse of the universe, and with his escape, he would ultimately become God. Tycho during this journey knows of Durandal's rampancy and warns the Marine endlessly through terminals that he is extremely dangerous. However, for the sake of humanity, the Marine has to work alongside all of the AIs to try and get the upper hand on this dangerous alien race. However, the secret as to why they had arrived here hadn't become clear to the Marine as of yet. It becomes clear that the phfor are not just a single race of aliens. They are in fact a collective of different species, all banding under one name. However, whilst they had their own ranks from fighters all the way up to high-ranking prophets, they were also slavers who had captured many other species over the years to use in their ultimate goal. The most significant species that they had captured was the Suffolk, who could be seen through their compilers, who were incredibly efficient in technology, half biological, half cybernetic, capable of hacking terminals with ease and capturing AIs. This is exactly what they do, as eventually the phfor utilizing the Suvet capture and destroy Leela, leaving the Marine alone with the rampant Durandal, who gives him all of the orders. During this, Durandal gets the Marine to explore one of the phfor's ships to see more about who they are and their technology, and during that time uncovers the horror that the phfor had been experimenting on humans, turning them into a new type of creature called the simulacrums, walking human bombs essentially, which blend into human societies and can cause mass destruction. After learning all of this, the Marine comes into contact with Tycho again, who also isn't doing very well, explaining that Durandal was extremely dangerous because of his rampancy and that he would do anything to get his way, explaining to us that the sole reason the phfor were here in the first place was because Durandal alerted them here as he wanted to steal their ship. You see, the reason why the phfor were able to attack so quickly and so efficiently when humanity made it to Tau Ceti IV was because they possessed faster than light drives, allowing them to venture across space extremely quickly. Durandal wanted this technology, and through the use of the Marine, this insanely powerful battle droid, he would be able to take out the phfor, free the Suffolk, and harness their technological know-how and steal the phfor's ship to find the universe's secrets before escaping its collapse and becoming what he believed would be a god. Trying to go against Durandal, the Marine realised that this AI did not care for humanity too much, as he would open doors packed full of phfor troops on the humans living on board named the Bobs, or Born on Boards. The Marine would save them as best as he could, but realised the only way of destroying the phfor was going to be through Durandal's plan and freeing the Suffolk from their controller, a cybernetic being that seemed to be controlling them through their minds. With the controller destroyed, the Suffolk would be free and Leela would be saved in the process, with her telling us that the rest of the colony was saved thanks to 9 other battle droids living down on the colony, showing that all 10 that were originally placed there had saved humanity from this deadly presence. With the destruction of the phfor now done, Durandal was able to grab hold of the phfor ship and utilize its FTL drive to venture across the universe. The Marine, however, despite thinking they'd stayed on the Marathon, would be captured by Durandal and placed in cold storage in the ship, ready to be utilized for whatever he had planned next. But sadly, as the phfor ship ventured off to its next destination, another group of phfor entered the Tau Ceti system just 3 months later and continued to destroy the human presence on the colony, totally wiping out all on the Marathon and down on the surface. All 24,000 colonists and the 9 battle droids were said to be fully wiped out, with Leela as well being captured by the phfor and sold to another alien race a lot later, and Tycho had also been captured by the phfor and turned into their own AI that would work for them, as he would go on to record the colony's destruction and would revel in it. Despite a new attack happening, there was nothing humanity could do at this stage anyway, as their message that was going back to Earth still had to wait for under a century for anyone to receive it. "17 years had passed since the attack on Tau Ceti, and Durandal had made it to his destination. This was the planet of Lawan, which was the home planet of the Suffolk. Getting here, however, the phfor are there waiting for his arrival, being alerted by Tycho, who has chosen to side with the phfor due to the treatment he received from the humans, blaming them for his rampancy, and that the phfor were the ones who gave him his new goal in life. And that goal was a simple one. It was to kill and destroy Durandal once and for all, clearly showing he was in the anger stage of rampancy. However, thanks to the sheer power of Durandal's ship, he is able to wipe them all out in just 2 minutes, as they are no match for his arsenal. Down on the planet, the phfor forces are massive, however, and once again the Marine is sent in to do Durandal's dirty work, although that is not known to the Marine. The only thing the Marine knows at this point in time is that Durandal is searching for something ancient and powerful that can turn the tide of war and help him on his overall goal. Venturing around the planet, taking out all of the phfor in the process, the Marine is still unaware of why he is here and what Durandal is actually planning. That was until the Marine learns of the ancient history of the planet and some of the Suffet's mythology. It is told that the planet of Lawan was not actually of the Suffet's making, but was actually made from an even more ancient species that would be known as the Yarrow, who, unless there are some still hidden in the galaxy, are extinct as of now. The Yarrow were an incredibly technological driven society who built up massive societies and pieces of technology to use on their day-to-day. Part of their creations were the Suffet themselves, who were used as their sort of servants, hence their cybernetics and knowledge of terminals and such. Some smaller technology would be some of that seen on the Marine himself, as well as the other battle droids, which explains their power and efficiency in battle. During their peak, they also worked alongside an ancient god or species of the Rakan Kakanta. However, nearing the end of their time on this universe, the working Kakanta would be imprisoned away in the planet's sun, and the Yarrow would disappear, leaving behind all of their technology and locations, leaving it for the Suffolk clans, which it was written to be 10. However, there was a myth that there was in fact 11th clan somewhere out there, although many do not know if this was true or not. When the phfor entered the scene, all 10 of the clans would be enslaved and used in their battles. However, the 11th clan, or the Suffolk Kur, was supposed to be out there still, and it was them who Durandal was looking for. The phfor didn't actually believe in the myth that there was an 11th clan of the Suffet. However, they were scared that the humans and Durandal might uncover something and use it against them. As a result, along with the help of Tycho, the phfor would send forward a massive fleet that made up 10% of all of their ships and would be under the leadership of their highly decorated war hero known as Admiral Fear, who would lead the charge on Durandal's phfor ship that he had renamed as the Boomer for some reason. Unfortunately for Durandal, the fleet was too powerful as they destroyed the Boomer, causing it to crash down on the planet and immediately forcing him to get to the Marine to save him from being captured and destroyed like Leela had, or worse, allowing Tycho to beat him. The Marine would go on to destroy Durandal as a result. However, Tycho got one up on them and captured him, placing him on their lead phfor ship. Before that, however, Durandal tells the Marine to work closely with his human allies and seek out a Suvit AI named Thoth. This AI was said to be located on the planet, and it could help turn the tides of war in their favour, but also told them to be wary, as Thoth was the AI of balance and did not choose sides, essentially meaning that it would side with humanity only if they were on the back foot. The second they looked to be winning, it would not help them anymore and might even go against them. Thanks to Thoth's help, as it believed humanity really needed it, the phfor would be messaged and would reveal themselves to help in the fight, as they had been located on one of the moons of the planet. At that same time, Durandal would return, stating he faked his death so that Thoth could help humanity locate the phfor, and now back into the picture, was able to capture the ship of the phfor and destroy the remainder of the 4 fleet, with the phfor helping fight the battle down on the planet's surface. The final battle takes place and it becomes a vital one, as Durandal and humanity find out that the 4 have got their hands on a Yarrow weapon, a devastating weapon created centuries ago that was used to completely wipe out slave revolts. This weapon would be known as the Trizeme, and with it being used, would force the planet's sun into an early nova, wiping out it and the planet and everything on it in the process, which is what originally killed the race known as the Nak, who were slavers and went against the Yarrow's way of life. Activating this weapon would also mean the release of the ancient species, or god of chaos, named the Workenkaketa, plunging the universe into sheer panic. As the weapon is eventually used by the 4, they are horrified at the result, as the Workenkaketa is ultimately released and everything is plunged into chaos, so much so that this leads the Marine into a new goal of diving into multiple different timelines to find a way to stop it all and bring back peace to everything. During these timelines, they will side with multiple AIs, fight through different battles, and also witness Durandal becoming a new AI, as he would link together with Thoth to become a new hybrid AI that, instead of saying I, would go around saying we, combining the speech styles of both Thoth and Durandal. Eventually, the Marine would do the impossible and stop the end of the universe, or the Nova at least, and with it would win the major respect of Durandal, who would be blown away by what they had accomplished during their journey. After all had been solved, it seemed that everyone went their separate ways, with Durandal leaving the planet of Luan in the 4th ship of the phfor. However, he would not return to humanity for another 10,000 years. Where he went to, no one really knows, and what he did during that time is a mystery as well, although it does seem plausible that he ventured back to Tau Ceti to interact with the corporations and factions that would make it there. However, when he did venture back to humanity once again, he would arrive in a Yarrow dreadnought that translated to the swift hand of God, and only returned because he wanted to assure that Earth did not forget him, almost like an ancient god returning to the scene. For the Suffolk, it was said that 70 years after the events of Luan, they would completely disappear, and it was unsure as to where exactly they went. For the 4, however, by Durandal's return, it was said that they were just a distant memory, although it is known that some were captured and placed within cold storage to be examined for humanity's sakes. So maybe at some point these guys will be released and will fight back against their captors in some form, or maybe hearing about Tau Ceti once again, they will emerge and hit any that try and settle on the planet once again. But that wouldn't happen for a good few years yet, anyway. The original attack on the Marathon took place in 2794, and upon that attack a distress signal was sent back to Earth to try and get reinforcements to enter the scene. However, as mentioned earlier, that message would not reach humanity for a good few decades, and in 2893 that message finally reached Earth and caused major damage for the general public, who did not really know of how the colony had been destroyed or what had destroyed them. That said, however, it did seem that the UESC and the corporations arrived back on the planet far earlier than suggested, as farms and scientific research facilities were said to be set up around the 2810s. Maybe this was thanks to the FTL ship the humans working for Durandal captured during the events of Luan, and as they ventured back to Earth told about what happened and showed them their FTL, or it was that they knew of the distress signal beforehand, but just didn't tell anyone till much later on. If you do know the reason for this, do let me know in the comments, because I'm a bit confused by this whole timeline of events and how it compares to the first few games, so do let me know. But regardless, when the distress signal finally did reach Earth, the corporations saw this as a perfect opportunity to venture out to this old colony and gather as much as they possibly could, not only for profit, but for data to sell, and also try and work out what happened to their operations that means no one is alive here anymore. And with that said, this brought about the next issue. For some unknown reason, the
planet's surface had become extremely hostile and almost unlivable starting in 2812, leading to humans being killed by anomalies and plagues looking like they were spreading throughout the lands. What these anomalies were is completely unknown, and some of it looks like it could be human engineered or engineered by another entity anyway, but it had made it impossible for any human to be down on the surface of the planet, as they would die in horrific ways.
Knowing about this, one corporation took action and looked at a solution to this problem. This corporation would be known as Sakaguchi Genetics, who, utilizing their years of cloning technology, created a printing worm that would create runner shells that could be used to venture into hostile areas without worry about environmental damage. These runner shells would then be implanted with digital minds of specific individuals who would be able to control their every action as if they were piloting these vessels. This came with a cost, however. Technically, these humans controlling the runners would not be humans anymore, and instead, their whole brain and consciousness would be turned into an AI that would be then implanted into these shells. Technically, their real bodies would be no more, and they would have to live the rest of their lives as digital beings. But the benefit was, they technically could never really die. Their runner bodies could be shot, dismantled, blown to smithereens, but their AI mind would live on and would be able to be placed into a new runner shell. And whilst it would cost quite a bit each time to print out a new body, the loot on the colony was deemed worth it for these individuals to keep diving down and going through it over and over again. Multiple factions with their own AIs would join this new expedition with their own unique goals, but all of them would have to face the UESC and their robots protecting the planet. Why they're protecting it can only be speculation at this point, but maybe that'll be the goal of one of these many factions. Mida is one of these very factions looking to fight back against the UESC and witness the surface for themselves, with even some runner shells looking like traditional Mida fighters. What their true goal here though is unknown. But considering they wanted to take over the whole of the Marathon and Tau Ceti back in the day, I'd imagine their goals are still the same, and if they can expose the UESC in the process, then that will be a very good day for them. Hopefully there will be lots to uncover down on Tau Ceti 4, and hopefully it'll all link to that original attack back almost 100 years ago. It would be great to see the 4 or Suffit make an appearance once again, and hopefully the UESC are hiding why they are really there on the planet's surface. I truly hope this game's narrative is worth it, because I am not a fan of this genre of game, but the Marathon IP is something special and can have some real talking points if they get it right. The fact that even to this day so much of Destiny and Halo's lore links to this IP still is really cool. I just pray that this game does cover that lore people have talked about for over 30 years, and hopefully it's not just linked with gun and armor lore descriptions or something like that like they do in Destiny. Even if the lore is found within hidden terminals, that would be quite nice, and a nice little tribute to not just Marathon but Halo as well. But until then, we'll just have to wait and see for how this game develops over the years, if it lasts that long anyway. For now, this has been the lore behind the Marathon universe so far, and hopefully stuff that you might need to know going forward into Marathon 2026. I want to say a big thanks for watching this video. I know it's a new IP and a controversial one to cover, but I am really hoping that Bungie can put out some great lore stuff with this new title. Because say what you will about Bungie, I've defended them many times over Destiny as I was a massive fan for years. Their lore can be absolutely incredible and shown itself off multiple times with Destiny. And with Marathon, there is so much they can explore. I just hope they maximize it and don't waste such an iconic IP. Let me know if you're getting the game and what you hope for with it in the comments below. Big thanks to my patrons for supporting the channel once again, including my small fishes, my big fishes, This Mind of Mine and Anthony Bonfiglio, my YouTube channel Wise One, Sith Lord 906, Video Game 75, Kosh 1516, the Nanontarium and V3XXE, my Shark Dan F and my Megalodons Sinus and Hazy Thoughts. Once again, a major thank you for watching this video. Hopefully the game is good enough that we can return and make more lore videos on it, but until then I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.